The text message arrived at exactly 7:12 p.m. "I'm stuck at work. Happy 10th anniversary, sweetheart." I stared at the words while sitting alone with a glass of iced tea in my favorite corner of Romano's Italian grill. Then I looked up. My husband was sitting exactly 2 tables away. He wasn't in his office. He wasn't trapped in a late meeting. He wasn't thinking about our anniversary. He was smiling at a young woman in a navy dress. I watched him reach across the table, tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and kiss her slowly enough that the entire restaurant seemed to disappear around me. For one heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. My chair scraped loudly across the hardwood floor as I stood. I took one step toward them. A man's hand gently closed around my wrist. "Don't," he said quietly. I turned, furious enough to pull away. He didn't tighten his grip. He didn't look frightened. He simply looked patient. Gray-haired, calm, well-dressed, maybe in his early 50s. He leaned toward me just enough to whisper, "Stay calm. The real show is about to begin." My name is Claire Morgan, and until that moment I believed I had a simple life. I was 38 years old, a former Army intelligence officer who had spent nearly a decade helping commanders separate facts from assumptions. After leaving the military, I started a small security consulting business, mostly working with local companies on risk assessments and employee safety. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me peace. My husband Ethan worked as a financial controller for a regional manufacturing company outside Columbus, Ohio. We had been married for 10 years. No children, not because we didn't want them, but because we kept telling ourselves we'd wait until life slowed down. It never did. Still, I believed we had something solid. We weren't the kind of couple who posted romantic photos online or renewed our vows every anniversary. We showed love in quieter ways. He brought me coffee every morning. I folded his laundry before he remembered to ask. We talked over dinner almost every night. Or at least, I thought we did. A week earlier, Ethan had apologized for missing our anniversary dinner. "Quarter-end reports," he'd said with a tired smile. "Rain check." I understood. Deadlines happen. So that evening, instead of feeling sorry for myself, I decided to visit Romano's anyway. It had become our place over the years. I thought I'd order my favorite chicken piccata toast to 10 years together and laugh someday about spending our anniversary alone. Instead, I found my husband celebrating with another woman. I looked back toward their table. They were laughing now. The waitress placed dessert between them. 2 forks. 1 plate. I took another step. The stranger spoke again. "If you confront him now," he said evenly, "you'll destroy months of work." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" He ignored my question. Instead, he nodded toward Ethan. "Look carefully." "I don't need to look carefully." "Yes," he said, "you do." Against my own judgment, I looked again. The stranger pointed without making the gesture obvious. "Wedding ring." I blinked. Ethan wasn't wearing his ring. That alone wasn't unusual. Sometimes he removed it at the gym. But tonight, he had dressed up. "Why remove it?" The stranger continued. "Watch the waitress." She approached Ethan's table without asking for their order. She already knew exactly what to bring. "Regular customers." Then he added quietly, "Notice where they're sitting. A private corner. Away from the entrance. Away from the windows. Not hidden, but protected." I suddenly realized Ethan wasn't relaxing. He kept checking his watch, scanning the room, adjusting his posture every few minutes. It wasn't the behavior of a man enjoying a romantic dinner. It looked more like someone waiting for something, or someone. I turned back toward the stranger. "Who are you?" "My name is Daniel." "Daniel what?" He hesitated. "That isn't important yet." "It is to me." He reached into his inside jacket pocket. For one frightening second, I wondered if he had a weapon. Instead, he placed a plain white business card on the table beside my untouched dinner. No company logo. No phone number. Only 2 lines. "Daniel Mercer, Federal Financial Crimes Task Force." I looked up so quickly my neck hurt. "What is this?" His expression never changed. He glanced once toward Ethan, then back at me. "In a few minutes," he said softly, "you're going to discover this night isn't really about your marriage." The restaurant suddenly felt much colder. "What do you mean?" Daniel looked directly into my eyes. "It's about what your husband has been stealing." Daniel let the silence settle between us. I stared at the business card, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Federal Financial Crimes Task Force. It sounded impossible, ridiculous, almost theatrical. My husband wasn't a criminal. He was an accountant. The kind of man who alphabetized our tax records reminded me when the smoke detector batteries needed replacing and insisted on returning an extra $5 a cashier accidentally gave him. I looked back toward Ethan. He was smiling again. Chloe laughed at something he had said, but it wasn't the carefree laugh of a woman on a romantic date. It was short, almost forced. Her shoulders remained tense, and every few seconds she glanced toward the restaurant entrance before looking back at Ethan. I hadn't noticed that before. Daniel folded his hands on the edge of the table. I know what you're thinking. No, I answered sharply. You don't. You think you caught your husband cheating. I watched him kiss another woman. Yes. So don't tell me I imagined it. I won't. He paused. But I will tell you that sometimes people kiss for reasons that have nothing to do with love. I almost laughed. What could possibly justify that? I'm not asking you to justify it. I'm asking you not to ruin what happens next. My patience disappeared. I don't even know you. No. You expect me to believe you're some federal investigator who just happened to be sitting behind me. I've been sitting here for nearly an hour. And that's supposed to make me feel better. It should make you curious. I folded my arms. It makes me angry. Daniel nodded. That's understandable. He never became defensive. His calmness irritated me even more. I've spent my career, I said, reading people. I know. That stopped me. What? You served in Army intelligence. My stomach tightened. You left 8 years ago. He continued speaking as though he were reading from a file. You now own Morgan Risk Consulting. I stared at him. You've never had a complaint filed against your business. He looked at me with quiet respect. That's one reason we hoped you wouldn't be here tonight. My heartbeat quickened. He ignored the question. Instead, he looked toward Ethan again. Tell me something. What? Has your husband seemed distracted lately? I wanted to say no. Instead, I remembered. Late-night phone calls. Canceled weekends. 2 business trips that suddenly became 3. A laptop he never left unattended anymore. When I asked if everything was all right, he'd smile and say, "Just work." I had believed him. Daniel watched my expression change. You've noticed. I noticed stress. So did everyone else. He reached into his jacket again. This time he removed a thin envelope. He slid out several photographs and placed them upside down. I'd rather not show you these. Then don't. But I think you'll ask. He was right. After several long seconds, I whispered, turn them over. The first photograph showed Ethan walking into a downtown office building. Nothing unusual. The second showed him leaving a hotel conference room. Again. Perfectly ordinary. The third picture stopped me. Ethan. Chloe. Another restaurant. Another dinner. Another kiss. Only this photograph had clearly been taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. My chest tightened. How long? 4 months. I closed my eyes. So he's been cheating for 4 months. Daniel slowly shook his head. Look at the dates. I did. The dinners happened almost exactly 3 weeks apart. Always on weekday evenings. Always in different restaurants. Always lasting less than 90 minutes. No weekends. No overnight hotel stays. No vacations. No holidays. It wasn't the pattern of an affair. It looked scheduled, deliberate, professional. I don't understand. I know. He gently gathered the photographs. Neither did we at first. Before I could ask another question, my phone vibrated. It was Ethan. I froze. Daniel looked at the screen but said nothing. The message read, "Working later than expected. Don't wait up. I love you." I stared at the words. At that exact moment, Ethan raised his wine glass toward Chloe. She didn't smile. Instead, she subtly touched the necklace around her neck. Daniel immediately noticed. So she did it. What? His eyes narrowed. She activated it. Activated what? He leaned closer. The recording device. I felt the blood drain from my face. What are you talking about? Daniel's voice became barely audible. Claire, Chloe isn't your husband's mistress. I blinked. What? She's been cooperating with us. I looked from Daniel to Ethan, then back again. No. The affair is real enough for everyone who's supposed to be watching. I shook my head. I don't believe you. I wouldn't expect you to. He glanced toward Ethan's table one last time. Then he quietly said, "The question isn't whether your husband is having an affair." He let the words hang between us. "The question is whether your husband is helping steal millions of dollars or risking his life trying to stop it." Just then Daniel's phone vibrated. He looked down. The color drained from his face. He wasn't supposed to leave yet, he murmured. I followed his gaze. Ethan was standing. So was Chloe. Neither of them looked at each other. They walked toward separate exits. Daniel was already reaching for his coat. Something went wrong. Daniel was already halfway to the door before I realized I was following him. Claire, he said without slowing down, if you stay with me, you do exactly what I tell you. I'm not letting my husband disappear. I didn't ask if you wanted to. His tone wasn't rude. It was urgent. Outside, the July evening felt unusually cool after the warmth of the restaurant. Ethan had climbed into his dark blue SUV and pulled away. Chloe exited through another door, walked to a compact sedan parked on the opposite side of the lot, and drove in the opposite direction. They're splitting up, I said. They always do. So you expected this? Yes, but not tonight. No. Daniel unlocked a gray government-issued SUV. Get in. I hesitated. Everything I'd learned in the army warned me against climbing into a stranger's vehicle. Everything I'd seen inside the restaurant told me my normal instincts were no longer enough. I opened the passenger door. As we pulled onto the road, Daniel slipped on a discreet earpiece. This is Mercer, he said calmly. Subject Alpha has departed early. Subject Bravo is heading east. Maintain visual. Do not engage. Static answered. Then another voice. Copy that. I stared at him. So this is real. I wish it weren't. For several miles, neither of us spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. If Chloe isn't his girlfriend? She isn't. Then why kiss her? Daniel kept his eyes on the road. Because somebody was watching. The restaurant. Not just the restaurant. He glanced at me briefly. The people we're investigating trust appearances. They believe what they can photograph. I thought about the dining room, the private corner, the familiar waitress, the careful seating. Nothing had happened by accident. It was staged, I whispered. The affection was. The kiss wasn't real. I didn't say that. His answer caught me off guard. What does that mean? It means undercover work isn't clean. Sometimes people cross lines they never expected to cross. I looked out the window. The betrayal still hurt. Whether it was fake or not, my husband had never warned me. He had let me believe our marriage was ordinary while living a second life. I wasn't sure which wound hurt more. We followed Ethan through downtown Columbus before he turned into an older industrial district, lined with warehouses and freight yards. This doesn't look like an accounting office. It isn't. Ethan parked beside a brick warehouse with faded lettering on the wall. No company signs. No security gate. Within minutes, 3 luxury SUVs arrived one after another. Men in tailored suits stepped out carrying slim aluminum cases. Nobody smiled. Nobody shook hands. They moved quickly inside. Daniel killed the headlights. What is this place? A transfer point. For what? We're hoping financial records. Hoping, if we're lucky. I frowned. I thought you knew. We know enough to investigate, but not enough to arrest. He looked toward the warehouse. Not yet. Another unmarked SUV rolled quietly behind us. 2 men and a woman stepped out wearing plain clothes. One of them leaned into Daniel's window. We're set. Daniel nodded. Hold positions. The agent glanced at me. Is she supposed to be here? No. Then why is she? Daniel answered honestly. Because life rarely follows the plan. The agent sighed. I'll notify command. He disappeared into the darkness. My military instincts returned almost automatically. I counted exits, windows, blind spots, vehicles. Old habits never completely disappear. Daniel noticed. You still do that. You noticed. You've identified 3 escape routes since we parked. I hadn't even realized I was doing it. Inside the warehouse, a large loading door rolled open. A delivery truck backed slowly inside. Several workers unloaded ordinary-looking cardboard boxes. That's it, I asked. It never looks exciting. One by one, the aluminum cases disappeared into the truck. Daniel lifted a pair of compact binoculars. His shoulders stiffened. What? Ethan wasn't supposed to be carrying anything. I reached for the binoculars. He handed them to me. There was my husband. Instead of standing with the executives, he was arguing with an older man in an expensive gray suit. Even from this distance, I could tell Ethan was angry. The older man pointed toward the truck. Ethan shook his head. Then, unexpectedly, he shoved the aluminum case back into the man's hands. What are they saying? I whispered. We can't hear them. The argument intensified. Another executive stepped between them. Someone pointed toward the parking lot. Toward us. Daniel's expression changed instantly. Damn. What? We've been made. The warehouse exploded into motion. Boxes hit the floor. Men began running in different directions. Car engines roared to life. Daniel grabbed the radio. Move, move now. Unmarked SUVs burst from the darkness. Red and blue emergency lights flooded the industrial yard. Agents shouted. Federal agents, nobody move. Panic spread through the crowd. Some executives froze. Others bolted. The truck lurched forward before slamming into a concrete barrier. I watched Ethan. Instead of running, he turned toward the chaos, toward us. Our eyes met across the parking lot. For a brief second, the world seemed perfectly still. I ran. I didn't care what Daniel yelled behind me. I didn't care about the agents. I didn't care about the investigation. I reached Ethan just as armed officers surrounded him. His face wasn't guilty. It was terrified. Not for himself. For me. Claire, he said, breathing hard. What have you done? I shouted. He looked over my shoulder, scanning the shadows. Then he grabbed both my arms. His voice dropped to a desperate whisper. You shouldn't be here. Tears blurred my vision. Were you cheating on me? He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were filled with exhaustion. No. Then tell me the truth. He looked directly into my eyes. I was trying to keep you alive. Behind us, Daniel shouted, Claire, get away from him. At that exact moment, someone fired a gun. The gunshot echoed through the warehouse yard like a crack of lightning. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Then everyone moved at once. Down, Daniel shouted. Strong hands grabbed my shoulders and pulled me behind a parked SUV, just as another shout erupted from across the loading dock. Suspect fleeing east, agents sprinted toward the far side of the warehouse. The single gunshot we would later learn hadn't been aimed at anyone. One of the executives had fired into the air while trying to create enough panic to escape. It worked. For about 10 seconds. Then half a dozen federal agents tackled him before he reached the fence. I looked back toward Ethan. He hadn't taken a single step. His hands remained visible. He slowly lowered himself onto his knees exactly as the agents instructed. Daniel walked toward him first. Ethan Morgan. I know. Hands behind your back. Without hesitation, Ethan complied. The agent secured his wrists with plastic restraints. I couldn't understand it. If he was innocent, why was he being arrested? Ethan, I cried. He turned his head just enough to see me. I'm okay. Those were his first words. Not, I'm innocent. Not, this isn't what it looks like. Just, I'm okay. That somehow hurt more. Nearly 2 hours later, I sat inside a small interview room at the federal field office. A paper cup of stale coffee rested untouched in front of me. Daniel entered carrying a thick case file. He looked more tired than he had all evening. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I don't want your sympathy. I know. I want answers. You deserve them. He sat across from me and opened the folder. Inside were photographs, bank records, corporate organization charts, transfer receipts, email printouts, page after page after page. Daniel slid one document toward me. Do you recognize this company? I read the name. Midwest Capital Logistics. No. You shouldn't. It doesn't exist. I frowned. What? It exists on paper. He turned another page. This company received nearly $18 million over the last 3 years. From Ethan's employer, yes. And then, it disappeared. He placed another document beside it. Another company. Another $16 million. Another shell corporation. Another vanished account. I felt sick. You're saying Ethan created these. We're saying someone using his authorization approved them. That's not the same thing. No. It could have been forged. It could have. He nodded. Which is exactly why we didn't arrest him months ago. I looked at him carefully. You still don't know. We know someone inside the executive team was moving money. But not who. Not completely. I leaned back. Then why handcuff him? Because everyone involved had to believe we were treating him like every other suspect. The room became quiet again. Finally, I asked the question I had been avoiding. And Chloe? Daniel sighed. She isn't Ethan's secretary. I blinked. What? Not anymore. He opened another folder. Her real name appeared at the top. Chloe Bennett. Below it, confidential cooperating witness. I stared at the page. She began cooperating with us 11 months ago. Why? Because she discovered the fraud after being promoted into executive administration. And the affair, there wasn't one. I saw them. You saw what they wanted people to see. I remembered the restaurant. The familiar waitress. The carefully chosen table. The repeated meetings every 3 weeks. Nothing had been spontaneous, Daniel continued. Several executives already suspected Chloe was leaking information. So she had to convince them she had Ethan completely under her control. The kiss. Yes, I covered my face with both hands. I hated her. I know. I hated him. I know. When I looked up again, my eyes were wet. Why didn't he tell me? Daniel answered without hesitation. Because you would have become part of the operation. I could have handled it. I believe you. Then why? He leaned forward. Because the fewer people who knew, the fewer lives were at risk. I thought about my years in Army intelligence. Operational security. Need to know. Compartmentalization. I had once defended those principles, now I hated them. Did he ever ask about me? I whispered. Daniel smiled faintly. Every single meeting. What? He had one condition before agreeing to cooperate. I stared at him. You. He told us your safety came before every arrest, every indictment, every dollar. A lump formed in my throat. He refused to let us involve you. I closed my eyes. The memory of Ethan checking the locks every night. Insisting I text him when I arrived safely. Encouraging me to vary my driving route after client meetings. I had teased him for becoming overprotective. Now those memories looked different. Not controlling. Protective. Terrified. Daniel quietly closed the folder. The operation is over. What happens now? The CEO and 4 senior executives are in custody. The money. We've frozen most of it. And Ethan. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He'll be released. Relief flooded through me. But first, he looked directly into my eyes. He has to tell you everything himself. An hour later, an agent escorted Ethan into a private conference room. He looked exhausted. His tie was gone. His sleeves were rolled up. There was a fresh bruise along one cheek. For several seconds, we simply looked at each other. Neither of us knew how to begin. Finally, he spoke. I'm sorry. I folded my arms. For lying. For making you carry tonight. Silence settled between us. Then Ethan took one slow breath. I discovered the fraud almost 2 years ago. He paused. And the hardest decision I ever made? Was choosing to keep it from the person I trusted most. I didn't answer Ethan that night. There are moments in life when words only make the truth harder to hear. I simply stood there looking at the man I'd loved for 10 years, wondering how someone could protect a marriage by filling it with secrets. Then I walked away, not because I had stopped loving him, because I no longer knew what love was supposed to look like. 6 months passed before we saw each other again. The federal case became front-page news across Ohio. The company's chief executive officer eventually pleaded guilty to conspiracy wire fraud and money laundering. 4 senior executives accepted plea agreements. Nearly $30 million in stolen retirement funds was recovered before it disappeared overseas. Hundreds of employees kept the pensions they had spent decades earning. That mattered. It mattered far more than I understood on the night everything fell apart. Daniel retired shortly after the trial. Before he left, he called me. I owe you an apology, he said. You don't. I do. For what? For asking one decent woman to carry the weight of an investigation she never agreed to join. I smiled for the first time in weeks. You were doing your job. So was your husband. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a long time. For months, I had viewed the story as one betrayal. Maybe it had always been 2. Ethan never pressured me to come home. He never showed up unexpectedly. He never begged. Once every few weeks, he mailed a handwritten letter. No excuses. No manipulation. No promises. Just honesty. In one letter, he admitted something that finally broke through my anger. I convinced myself I was protecting you from dangerous people. I never realized I was also protecting you from the truth. Somewhere along the way, I stopped treating you like my partner and started treating you like someone who needed to be shielded. That wasn't love. It was fear. I read that sentence at least 20 times. Then I folded the letter and cried harder than I had cried the night I found him in the restaurant. Because for the first time, he wasn't defending himself. He was finally letting me see him. A few weeks later, I called him. There are 2 conditions, I said. I'm listening. Marriage counseling. Done. Complete honesty, no matter how uncomfortable. I should have started there 10 years ago. And one more thing. What? If the government ever asks you to become a secret hero again? He laughed softly. Tell them to find someone else. I already did. We met the following Saturday at a small coffee shop halfway between our homes. No expensive dinner, no anniversary, no dramatic speeches, just two people trying to decide whether trust could survive after being broken from two different directions. "I owe you an apology," I said. He looked surprised. "You don't." "I do." "I saw one kiss." I paused, and I decided I knew the entire story. "You had every reason. I had evidence." "You had pain." "I stopped believing in you before I asked a single question." He reached across the table. Not dramatically. Not like the kiss that had shattered my world. Just enough to rest his hand near mine. "I also stopped believing in us," he said. "I thought carrying everything alone made me strong." "It made you lonely. It nearly cost me my marriage." For the first time in months, I placed my hand over his. Neither of us pretended everything was suddenly fixed. Real life doesn't work that way. Trust isn't rebuilt with one conversation. It's rebuilt with hundreds of small decisions. Keeping promises, answering difficult questions, choosing honesty when secrecy feels easier. One ordinary day at a time. Today, nearly 2 years later, we're still together. Not because our marriage survived betrayal, because it survived the truth. Whenever people ask what I learned from that anniversary dinner, I tell them something simple. Sometimes your eyes tell you only part of the story. Sometimes the person you love makes terrible decisions for what they believe are the right reasons. Neither excuses dishonesty. Neither justifies assumptions. A strong marriage needs both honesty and trust. Without honesty, trust slowly dies. Without trust, even the truth arrives too late. If my story reminded you that love isn't just about believing someone, but also about having the courage to seek the whole truth before making your final judgment, I hope you'll carry that lesson into your own life. And if this journey touched your heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever discovered that the truth was far more complicated than it first appeared? Your story might encourage someone else who needs hope today. Thank you for spending this time with me. If you'd like to hear more stories about resilience, forgiveness, and quiet justice, I hope you'll subscribe and join me again.